Two type 1 diabetics sit down to discuss their completely opposite methods to manage blood sugars, yet somehow they were able to maintain the same level of control with their time and range. Who is this? Well, I finally got my sister to agree to an interview. Now, she's an ICU nurse, also living with type 1 diabetes. And obviously, I live with type 1 as well. I'm a certified master fitness trainer and nutritionist. And we compare our strategies, both the similarities, but also a lot of the differences, and how ultimately it doesn't matter which one you pick as long as you pick one. So I hope today's methods are helpful for you. I hope you can take away some strategies to implement in your own life with type 1 diabetes. And I know a few of the stories are going to shock you. So hold on. It's a fun ride, and I can't wait for you to dive in. We'll start with our theme song and then jump right into the stories.
I've spent the last 10 years pushing the limits while identifying trends and patterns in my type 1 diabetes management. Follow along as I learn, apply, and share the fitness, nutrition, and lifestyle strategies that I've learned from diabetes experts around the world. The real question is, how can we live fearlessly with diabetes while maintaining stable blood sugars? This podcast is here to give you the answer. My name is Matt Vandervecht, head coach and co-founder of FTF Warrior, and welcome to Part of My Pancreas.
All right. Well, I am excited to have this chat as people were demanding it across all platforms on YouTube and the podcast. I even sent you a few of the screenshots. I was like, look, everybody says we have to talk. So everyone, this is my sister. This is Karlyn. And Karlyn, I'm excited to have you here for two reasons. One, you have type 1 diabetes like me. And two, you also were on the same trip as me, so we get to compare our strategies, our experiences, and I mean, at a high level, our numbers. But I wanted to give you a chance to kind of introduce yourself and maybe share, because everybody else doesn't know, how long have you had diabetes? What do you use to manage it? Kind of give us an intro.
Yeah, thanks for having me. As you said, I'm Karlyn. I've had diabetes for 11 and a half years. The first but I now use Dexcom CGM in tandem with the closed loop, and it's a life changer for sure. It's great we have so many options, but I definitely appreciate having some of the work done for me with sugar checks and giving insulin.
For sure. Do you actually, I don't even know this, do you use Control-IQ 100% of the time or sometimes never?
I use it all the time. I've definitely heard some people say like they turn it off for certain things or I see what would happen, but so far I've just kept it on and adjust it as needed, but let it do its thing. So,
well, let's just go ahead and jump in then. So, and anybody who doesn't know, I was diagnosed first, and that is the big brother role that I had to play. But we can get into this maybe in a second episode in case, actually, if people would like to hear this, we can maybe do a second interview. But the day you were diagnosed, I was more angry than I was when I was diagnosed. That was a hard message to receive. My little sister got diabetes too. But it's given us, oddly enough, a lot to bond over and a lot of connection points like this. So in getting ready for this trip, I mean, I have known that we have a little bit of a different management strategy, as far as how we approach diabetes. But what goes through your head when you're preparing for a trip or packing for it, and what's that look like for you?
Yeah, I feel like we kind of talked about this before, but like just, we always pack extra. I think when you see like blogs about it or different diabetics talking about it, well, hopefully most people pack extra because it would be a really bummer to be stuck when like, I have no Dexcom. Yeah. So I had changed my Dexcom, I think like 1 or 2 days before our trip. So it worked out really well. I wouldn't have to change it during, but that didn't mean I might have issues or come off or whatnot. So I think I brought 2 extra Dexcoms and then an extra transmitter just to have that. And then I brought lots of juice boxes and applesauces and like fruit bar things, like lots of low snacks. Even though I know I had access to food, it's just so much easier to have your own. And as far as like tandem supplies, I brought, enough for like what I would need, probably plus like 3 extra. I'm trying to think how many I brought. I just stuffed the bag with it. Because it's better to be over prepared. But it is sometimes a bummer, I feel like, as a diabetic packing, because you're like, I just look like I'm bringing my whole house, but a lot of this stuff is just for my life.
Right.
Or like the what if situations, because, I guess you could try to make an announcement overboard. Like anyone have Diabetes supplies. Any other type ones out there?
Well, not gonna lie, whenever we have a family vacation, I always have a little bit of added comfort because I'm like, if something breaks, I'll just ask my sister and we'll figure it out. Like we'll split the
Yep,
last
I had
vial.
that too. I
Oh
had
my
that too.
gosh. But I mean, similarly, I pack extra as well. For me, it was actually a lesson I had to learn the hard way. So when I was living in Milan, Italy, I ran out of test strips completely.
Mm.
And at that point, my Dexcom G5 had to be calibrated twice a day. I couldn't calibrate. And so I did what you're not supposed to do. I don't recommend this, but I calibrated with the number it already had. So I was like, I hope it's right, and I had no way of testing. So that's a terrifying place to be. I've also run out of insulin, also terrifying. Had to go to a local pharmacy in Africa. So yes, pack extra. I always recommend packing triple. I brought 3 Dexcoms because I did have to change it on the trip. That was frustrating. I went high. And then I brought 10 sites, which is a little bit ridiculous, but it lined up to where I needed, I think, 2 or 3 during the trip. So I was like, let's just bring triple. So yeah, packing with diabetes, man. My wife gives me a little bit of a hard time. She's like, your bag is just as big as ours and our daughter's. Half of it is diabetes supplies, and the other half is low snacks. I have like 2 t-shirts in there. That's it, I promise. So it's definitely frustrating, but I don't know if you've ever used this, but hopefully people watching know this as well. Do you ever use the medical bag when you're flying that you get to carry on for free?
I have used it before. I used it when I went to Spain and Portugal quite a few years ago because I like learned about it then. Like that was in
Oh,
2019, and I was like, great, because I was trying to use a carry on. I was going for 3 weeks. I was like, I can just have this extra purse with all my medical stuff.
yeah.
And I even like called and messaged people to make sure on like my hopper flights would be okay. And like
Mm,
I mostly got good answers and some didn't really answer. And so I got some of the flights and I was like, I really hope they don't give me crap because I can't fit this in my bag. And sometimes I didn't even notice. I just like kind of put it to the side and they didn't see it. But they gave me a hard time one time and I was like, it's all diabetes supplies, medical supplies, and they like kind of didn't understand or like weren't gonna let me have it. But then I was able to like talk through it and they let me.
wait, was
So
that London?
no, London was different. We don't
That
that was in like Spain or Portugal. It was I think they just weren't familiar with it, or like maybe they didn't expect me to like have a medical disease that like needed supplies, or
yeah,
like expecting someone like older like to look sick to need like a
right.
medical bag. I don't know,
Where's
but
your dialysis stuff? You're like, I'm healthy mostly. It's just
just
an
need to have a
autoimmune
machine. I
disease.
don't, like
Yeah. You know what I love about this so far? We're like, what, 5 minutes in? And we've already mentioned between the two of us, like 7 countries that we've traveled to. And for anybody who's watching, it might be like, wait, you can do all that stuff with type 1? It's like, okay, the time zones are tricky and do pack extra supplies. But I mean, clearly it hasn't stopped us from traveling the world, right? And
yeah, just like
having fun. How many countries have you been to? Have you counted?
oh no, because I think my first big trip I did like 9 or 10,
Yeah.
and then I've done like Thailand and Spain and Portugal and Croatia and Slovenia and Japan. So I feel like I'm probably like around 20-ish. I don't know, maybe more. But probably I mean obviously Canada, Mexico.
Yeah.
But
They still count, I counted Jamaica, even though that
actually
was like a
Michael's.
2-day trip. I
I
love
touched down
it.
in China for a layover. Just kidding, that doesn't really count.
If you step outside of the airport, in other words, if you get the passport sticker or print or visa, I count it. So for me, at least 12 hours, and typically you get outside the airport. Yeah, that's awesome. So 20s, that's amazing. And obviously, you're a couple of years behind as far as time on Earth. So you still got time to catch up to me, but
Oh, okay.
I am still in the lead for now. I think my last count was 37 that I ended up doing, but we haven't traveled in like 5 years, 4 years
Well,
since.
I'll count and get back to you and tell you
Yeah.
how.
Love it. Anyways, so getting off track. But we added a new series of ports to our passports. Not really, they didn't stamp it. It's always disappointing when they don't stamp your passport. You're like, I made it all the way here. Just give me the dang stamp. Anyways, we're in Mexico, right, on this cruise. So 3 different ports. Went to Cabo San Lucas, Mazatlan, and Puerto Vallarta. So in traveling to different countries, obviously you want to take that into consideration. But in traveling on a cruise ship, boy, that is a different experience altogether. Like I feel like all the rules just get thrown out the window with diabetes because the food's different, your activity level is different. So when traveling on a cruise ship, do you have a plan for how things are going to change, or is it more like shoot from the hip, we'll see how this goes?
I don't know, this random phrase popped in my head before we got on a call of like, I feel like my motto, not all the time, I definitely still plan and like have routines or have strategies, but I think with things like this, you don't really know what to expect. It's like you can wing it with wisdom. Like I'm not just winging it completely,
Oh,
but like I'm pulling from like my 11 and a half years of diabetes and like what we've talked about and like what I've heard from other people. And um I'm not going off of nothing, but I'm also being like, okay, I'm gonna like do my best and like see how it goes. And if I'm trying something and it's not working, I'll try something else. Like like you said, like different foods, different schedules, like different exercise levels. There's a lot of change. And so just be able to come at it with like, I'll kind of like figure it out on the go approach. Like I'll take what I have and apply that in the beginning. But if that doesn't work or there's issues, like, okay, you just have to adjust and kind
mhm.
of like go from there. And like, because my goal is like, I want to still like enjoy my vacations and like give grace to myself if like my numbers are perfect. And knowing like I'm not going to give up and be like, oh, I'm just going to live like high the whole trip. Like, no, like I'm not going to do that. But
Right.
I also am going to say like, okay, do the best I can and also like enjoy my life to the fullest. And it's just like for me, finding that balance is important.
Yeah. Man, I wish I had like a GoPro strapped to my chest the whole trip because I would have had you on camera saying another quote that I've already quoted like 3 times in other videos. I was asking you, like, hey, what's the plan? There's a lot of protein and carbs. And I'm like doing the macronutrients count in my head. And you're like, hey, I'm just trying to live my best life. And it was like the funniest thing that you're being truthful, right? But I was just like so caught off guard. I'm like, yeah, that is part of this, the goal here, right? But wing it with wisdom, that is a catchphrase. I am totally going to steal that and put it somewhere. I don't know. That's amazing. Kudos to you. So wisdom, I feel like that's largely contextual knowledge, right? Where it's like lived experience and you've learned
Mhm.
from your mistakes. But I want to add in something here. I should have said in the beginning. Obviously, everyone watching me knows that I've got my wisdom side, but also the knowledge side, right? Certified master fitness trainer and nutritionist. But Karlyn also has a significant knowledge base. She's an ICU nurse and has a lot of experience. And actually, are you still? I don't want to ruin any surprises. Are you still pursuing the next certificate?
Yeah,
Okay, tell us
I
about that.
so yeah, I still work in the ICU, but for a few years now, I've kind of thought about trying to get my CDE and to do my diabetes education certification. And the process is just a little convoluted, where you like need a job to get hours, but to get hours, you need a job. So I was able to find a way to like train as an educator at my hospital and like pick up shifts. So I actually have a shift this week on my own, and I get to kind of build up hours toward a certification and kind of see what it's like too, which is really cool. And I found like I just really enjoy educating patients and like connecting with them and surprising them sometimes too when I tell them I have diabetes and they don't expect it. Or like pulling out my pump and being like, oh yeah, like this is mine, or like showing them my Dexcom on my arm. Like and I don't know, it's just a fun way to connect people. But yeah, so it's in progress. And I'm going to a diabetes conference next month too to learn and study. But yeah.
Right on. And I love that you've got the shared experience to offer patients. And it's so powerful to interact with somebody else who gets it, right?
Hmm.
Because in the hospital, yeah, it's so easy to ignore. I hate to say this because you work in a hospital too, but it's so easy to ignore people if they are ignorant or just don't get what you're going through because it feels cold or even just like they're going by the book but don't really want the help. I don't know. It's a weird feeling. So
Hmm.
for you to then turn around and be able to show them, oh, I get it. I live with it too, is so powerful. And I love that you're taking advantage of that and pursuing the CDE. It's so cool. And obviously, you spent some time with a few of our clients. So I'm sure it's a little bit different where it's people who are more advanced asking advanced questions versus you educating and motivating in the same sentence because they don't want to take care of themselves potentially, right? It's awesome that you're doing a lot of good in the world on both sides. But that's another tangent. Back to the story on the cruise ship. So on a cruise, we had endless food, which for me was a dream come true because I'm in the middle of training still and I need more calories. But I recognized I have very little willpower to say no to foods when it's everywhere. So you were living your best life and kind of winging it with wisdom, like you said. But when you get to the meals, do you assess macronutrients in general, like carbs and fats and proteins, looking at fiber and these things? Or is your brain like, I'm going to guess on the carbs and we'll reassess in an hour and dose again if I have to? What is your plan of attack there?
Yeah, I think in the beginning, especially with our dinners, because we had like multi-course dinners that took like an hour
Yeah.
and a half, like you didn't really know the timing of the food coming out.
Yeah.
It was like appetizers, dinner, dessert. Um, in the beginning, I was just like giving amounts like each time, like, okay, I think they'll come and like I'm gonna start eating this and then like give more as needed. And um, so it was kind of like stacking, but that really was the only way I could do it. Like if I wanted to eat as it came instead of I feel like the other option would have been like I could have, waited until all the food came and then ate, but they kind of didn't give us the next food until we ate it. So
I found
I
that
was
out
like,
three
I'll just
days in.
go with it. And I think as I was able to like assess and be like, oh, I'm like sometimes I would be like going low after a meal, but then going high later. Like that was when I realized, okay, like yeah, like this is definitely higher fat and protein than I
Mhm.
usually eat. And like realizing I need kind of an extended bolus. I wouldn't say I like try to like look at each food and say like, oh, it's this much protein, fat, carbs, like exactly, but more like I call it like guesstimating.
Mhm.
And more just realizing, okay, like this later spike, it's the fat, like it's just it is, and I can prevent the low and high and like make it more even if I'm doing more of an extended bolus for part of the insulin. Like I wasn't doing it for all of it. I would give some, and then I would do like a you know like say like 40 or 50 of the carbs I'm doing like a split extended bolus, and kind of just tinkering with it each night and reassessing as needed.
Reassess. That is such a powerful word for cruises.
Mhm.
Yeah, that was a huge part of my plan as well. And obviously, for me, I do like the numbers where I'm like, what are the exact carb, fats, proteins if I can get it, at home with labels or if I'm measuring my food out. But on the cruise, didn't have any nutritional facts. There were two items in total on the breakfast buffets that had carb counts. And I was like, thank God there's some kind of organization I can follow. But yeah, you're guessing a lot. And for me, the key was reassess, what worked, what didn't. I noticed the exact same pattern where I would drop significantly right after a meal and then hours later, poof, stubborn high, just take off, and had the same conclusion. It's like, all right, the fats and proteins are getting to me. I probably shouldn't have had my fourth and fifth plate of meat because it was free. But that was tricky to say the least. So
Mhm.
you used extended boluses. I heard you mention. Uh,
Mhm.
I did not. I ended up using just check in and dose if I need it kind of a
Mhm.
method, which looking back, extended bolus would have made it less. It would require less of my attention. You just kind of set it and then hopefully you don't hear any alarms, right? But how did it work for you? Was it a success?
Yeah, I think it definitely was helpful. I mean, not to say like, oh, my sugars were like perfectly in range then the rest of the trip because I used that. Like, no, there was still things to like tinker with, and like I was still guessing on the carbs, so sometimes I wasn't guessing perfectly, but it definitely helped with the like the drop and high, like the hill and valley. It was more like, okay, it's more like more gradual. It's not as like crazy stubborn or high. And if I needed to, like if I was like thinking like, okay, am I going low or am I just dropping back to normal? Like I could stop the extended bolus if I needed to, like an hour into it. Um, but that definitely was a good tool to have because otherwise, yeah, it's more time intensive of like I have to check in and like give a little more and then give a little more and give a little more. And I think the extended bolus helped, even if I maybe still if I did go high after at some point, I wasn't going as high because I think
Mhm.
having insulin like working in the system already, because sometimes those stubborn highs, like you just keep throwing insulin at it and you're like, how much more do you need? Like, I
Oh, I've
swear this
certainly
is a
done
lot.
that. You give a ton of insulin, you're like, this is going to make me go low for sure. And then you're 50 points higher an hour later, and you're like, there's no way. How? How did that need more? Oh my goodness. And I'll tell you, one of the most frustrating situations, I would say probably the most frustrating situation for type 1 diabetes in my life, is to dose for a meal within 30 or 60 minutes to go low and have to treat, knowing that because of the fat and protein, an hour or two later you would have been high anyways, but because you had to treat for the low, you're going to be skyrocketing like
Mhm.
past the moon. Because you don't want to treat the low. You're like, I know this is going to come up, but it's not coming up for at least an hour. So I have to drink juice right now. It's just going to make everything worse. Uh, I mean, have you experienced that at all? Or did you on that trip?
When you were saying that, I was thinking about like, I don't have it all the time, but like I feel like if I have like Thai food or pizza, and if I go
I was
low,
going to
like
say
during eating that, it's
pizza.
the worst because like the high is coming, like
Yeah.
whether it's mild, medium, large, whatever, like severe, moderate. But
Hmm.
you're like, I have to treat the low because I'm like, I can feel the low, and it's like the fast not gonna hit me fast enough to make me go high enough. And you're like, I feel like sometimes I'll like treat myself, and I'm like, should I give myself more insulin? Also,
Right.
like, so sometimes I do, and it's just like that funny game you play. And I think that's when sometimes people are like, is it worth it to have it? And sometimes we're like, yes, I want my pizza or my Thai food or like whatever it is that is hard to deal with, but you're
Right.
willing to deal with it a certain amount of time. And it's like in the moment you're like, is it worth it? You're like, it tasted good, but no, I'm dealing with this for hours, or not all the time. I think sometimes, we get it right and we're like, magic, we figured out the formula. And the other times, an unforeseen low comes in and you're like, okay, here we go. Like, hold on for the ride. But
Hmm.
yeah, that's kind of how diabetes is. It's you you have to kind of assess where you're willing to like put more work in or not, or like, no, I'm just gonna stick with my meat and veggies and rice that I know is this many carbs, So
Right. Well, and yeah, that I think boils back to the, is it bolus worthy, right? Like, oh,
mhm.
that pizza was so good. I'm gonna do it again. Hopefully I get it right this time. And I mean, to be completely transparent with everybody, I did have a low on the boat. It's like, dang it, didn't keep it in range, Um, it was only 69. So technically it was the closest to not being low, but still low. But that experience, I watched it go down. I was like, I'm just gonna hang out, hunker down. Maybe I don't need juice. And then it got into the 60s and I was starting to shake. And I was like, gosh dang it, I have to have the juice. I know I'm going to skyrocket after this. And sure enough, I spent the entire night high. It was like, oh, I knew I didn't need that, but the timing was just messed up. Uh, and obviously, activity plays a role in that. So the low was brought on because we were walking all around the ship,
Mhm.
looking at shows and entertainment. And obviously, we got the flow rider, the whole family
Mhm.
got the advanced band for, which is like, wow, that's so cool. So I'd love to talk just for a second on activity. Like when you know you're going to be active, I know there are a lot of breakfasts that we had where the hours for the activities were weird. So it was like you eat breakfast and then immediately go to the man-made wave for surfing. So how do you think about mealtime and activities? Do you adjust your bolus, your pre-bolus, or not dose? Do you avoid carbs? Do you
Mhm.
not have a plan? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think it was interesting with the fluorider that way because I think I tried to adjust for it in the beginning of like, oh, like, do I need to take less or do I need to like bring a snack before or like to have a little snack before I go on? But then I realized that it wasn't like a strenuous enough exercise really to like make me drop because it was short. Like you're only on it for like a minute or two, and then you have to wait again for a while to do it again. And then you're on for like basically it's like 1 to 3 minutes, like the max amount of time. And it's not like a high intensity cardio or anything. So I think I realized, oh, I actually don't really need to adjust for this activity as much. And because I found myself going a little bit higher after. Um,
Oh,
I think I would take my pump off for going
sure.
on. And there was in the beginning, I did take a snack because I was like, I was running even, but I was like, maybe I need a little snack before. And then I was like, oh, I didn't actually need that.
Same. Yeah.
Um, so I think with that activity, I saw like, oh, I don't actually need to adjust. But and I think for the cruise in general, my activity levels were just really different. And like I wasn't, in the gym as much and was kind of doing sporadic things. So it was like, okay, like I'm here, I'm gonna randomly play pickleball because we realized there's open pickleball right now. Like,
Oh,
okay,
sure.
it's like thankfully it was at 4 p.m. So it wasn't like right after a meal. So that was
Yeah.
helpful. But like then in the moment having to adjust and be like, okay, where am I at? How much insulin's on board? what kind of activity am I doing?
Hmm.
Okay, we can do this.
Yeah, huge question that I think a lot of people just don't consider is like what you just said, how much insulin is on board, right?
Mhm.
Because if there's none on board, not necessary to make an entire game plan for it. But yeah, with
Mhm.
insulin on board, it's a lot more volatile, especially if
Mhm.
it's spontaneous. Hey, look, pickleball's open. Let's go play. Oh, it's fun. We're going to play for 2 hours, right? Ooh, that requires a little bit of a plan. So, love that you are continuing with this theme of living my best life, just going to do it, and figure it out. Um, with activity levels differing, you said you didn't go to the gym quite as much. Is that something that you were planning on doing, or was it just like, oh, there's too many fun things to do, didn't do it? Um, and what kind of an impact did you see? Were you more insulin resistant?
Um, well, I went the first day and it was so crowded, I didn't like it.
It was
So,
ridiculous. I was there at
uh,
6 a.m. and it was full. I had to
yeah,
wait.
yeah. I was like, I think I went like 7 or 7:30 and it was already full. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I was like, they really need another gym here. Like this,
No.
we have thousands of people on this boat, and there's like one medium, small gym.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think I was like, okay, I'll just try to do like activities and exercises, like fun activities and exercises that still are exercise, like
Yeah.
pickleball or something. Um, but I also think I knew like I had to do. I'm doing PT right now for like rehabbing my shoulder and knee a little bit. So I was like doing those exercises in the room.
Oh yeah.
So I had that small amount, but
Who's your
I
therapist? I might know them.
oh, it's actually not them.
What?
Oh man, our parents are physical therapists, so they have helped me before. But I realized I needed someone, like I needed to actually go in person and like be held accountable in
Uh,
that way. Because I think if it's your family, it's like, oh yeah, I should do this.
I'll totally do the exercises.
But I
Yeah.
think having to like pay my little copay helps me too. Of like, I'm paying
Oh,
for this, I better do the work.
fair. Yeah.
But yeah, I think with having less activity, I mean, sometimes it was like, okay, is it all about high fat and protein that's causing me to have, more insulin resistance and highs?
Hmm.
Is it also the less exercise added in? So I think I did ask that question of like, you know, is it more one or the other? And I definitely think, less exercise definitely has an effect.
Hmm.
Um, and I think I kind of tinkered with the idea of like, should I just increase my basals for like the trip? And I didn't end up doing that, but that definitely crossed my mind of like
Hmm.
just everything going on. But I was like, do I want to like mess with it and then potentially have lows? So I was kind of went in between those ideas and just kind of stuck with my normal settings and just added on more corrections and let the control IQ do some of its work too.
Oh yeah, true. So with the resistance versus sensitivity discussion, I think that's always a powerful question to ask. Okay, I'm high, but is it because of the food? Is it because of lack of exercise? I'm just trying to identify the true cause. Uh, with that, you've got this. I don't know. For me, at least, it's kind of a balancing decision. So I went to the workout every single day because I knew I was going to make poor choices with food, and I think it helped. But honestly, the food was just overpowering. It was very clear that it had an impact on blood sugars.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, to you, though, was the food worth it? Or was it just like, oh, it was fun, but I wouldn't typically eat that kind of food?
Um, I think some of it was worth it. I mean, there was definitely good food. I think we both, like we said, like struggle. It's like, oh, it's free. Like, eat all the
Right.
food, make it worth it.
Get my money's worth. Yeah.
Exactly. I think that's like basically our whole family feels that way of like, it's free, it's there. Like, we paid money for this cruise, like, might as well like make it worth it. And
Right.
um, I think some of the things like I would be like I think as the cruise goes on, it gets a little less like exciting and less like the need for that lessens a little bit for me of like, okay, Karlyn, you don't need to eat all the food, like especially if you're not
Right.
hungry because you like, like if we have such big dinners, I feel like in the morning sometimes I'm like, I'm not even that hungry, like I just need something small. But then it's like this huge buffet and you're like, but I haven't tried that yet. So you have to kind of be like, but do you need it? And I
Right.
think it definitely is like an exercise in like self-control and like assessing yourself and being like, can I say no and it'd be okay? Okay, let's try it.
Yeah.
um, but I think with the dinner food, I think was usually more worth it because it's a little better and it's like a nice experience too. But there are definitely sometimes where I was like eating something and I'm like, I don't really want this rice and I don't need to eat it. And like my sugar's okay. And like I'll like save the insulin I gave and like just use that for dessert kind of. And
Yeah.
like adjusting to be like, because I think sometimes with diabetics, we can be like, well, I gave insulin, like I have to eat it. And like be like, I'm not even hungry and I don't want it or it doesn't taste good.
Hmm.
And so it was nice to be able to adjust and be like, well, I'll just have some dessert. That's fine. And I want
Right.
this rice, you know, and um kind of like substituting foods, you know.
Hmm. Oh, I love that example. I've walked a few clients through this. It's almost an exchange system where, if your blood sugars are good, like you're saying, you don't want that food, but you know you have to eat for what you dosed for. You're exchanging for a similar carb count is the goal, right? But what's interesting is, like you said, you can reassess. Like, where are the blood sugars? Are they at a good spot? Or in some cases where I've been coaching some individuals, they were dropping. Their pre-bolus was too strong, and they're like,
Mhm.
I'm supposed to eat a bunch of broccoli. That's not going to help. I'm like, you're right. It's not going to help. Don't eat your salad. Grab a juice box. Use the juice instead of the salad, and it's still going to match the carbs, hypothetically, to make it faster. And I mean, it's a bummer when you can't finish your food because you had to treat for low or something. But
Mhm.
different foods that absorb faster or slower, we have that choice. But dessert wise, there were a few desserts that I had same thing. It's like, I've never had this before. I'm gonna have it. Underwhelming, but there were a few that really stood out to me. What was your favorite dessert that we had?
There's so many. You know, well, it's funny. I was telling someone like one of my favorite like treats that I had was they had like soft serve
Oh,
any time
that
of
was
day
good.
basically, and that was pretty good.
Yep.
Like we were talking about how like that was better than a lot of the desserts. Like there were some good desserts, but like some of the desserts were like, meh. I'd
It
rather just have
was
some soft
though.
serve.
I forgot about that. That was the best. Well, that was second place.
Okay.
For
Well, what
me,
was your
number
first
one,
place? Yeah.
it was a chocolate brownie with dark chocolate mousse, I think it was, and some other kind of like triple chocolate thing. And it would just
Hmm.
melt in your mouth. And it was
Yeah.
so delicious, but it was so rich that I didn't need the whole thing. So I took it to go. And I would just
Hmm.
take a bite like, once an hour. And I was like, this is so good. Just keeping this flavor. And it
Yeah.
was ridiculous. But uh, yeah, like half the desserts I took to go, and I would just munch on it for the next 24 hours since we had a fridge in the room that worked. I know your fridge didn't work. That sucks. But I always ordered two desserts, two entrees, and two appetizers because I found out you could just keep asking for stuff because it's included, and so I would just take things. So that was again fun, but poor willpower. So looking back at this trip, then would you say that diabetes was on your mind? Was it at the front of your mind, or was it hardly a thought?
I think it was somewhere in the middle. I mean, it definitely was something I had to like to be aware of and address. Like I said, though, I think having control IQ definitely helps with some of it to be like, okay, like it's keeping me like a little bit higher, a little bit lower to like help me be in range. Um, there definitely was, adjustment to dinners, or like sometimes during dinner we would run with the kids to let them get energy out. Like I would run with my nieces and nephews, and some nights I'd offer to because my sugars were fine. Other times I was like, maybe I shouldn't because I'm on the lower side. And then just give some insulin. Um, and so it's definitely always something I think I'm aware of, whether it's in the back of the mind or more forefront, like as I'm assessing and strategizing. But with that being said, I think, I was still able to enjoy food, enjoy time with family, enjoy activities. Um, and yeah, and kind of just take this experience and learn from it and, apply it to future experiences too. Um, I think trying to have that mindset is helpful of like, even if I did something imperfectly or I could have done better, I can like store that information so I can wing it with wisdom in the future. Less winging.
Right. Well, and winging it with wisdom in and of itself is a framework because you're winging it with wisdom from previous experiences of winging it, right?
Mhm.
So you wing it, what worked, what didn't. Now I'm wiser. Next time you wing it, but it's with more context and you're able to produce better results. So, I mean, really, you could just create a whole method surrounding winging it with wisdom on how to manage diabetes. I love it. Oh, man. But yeah, I think that the opportunistic opportunities, like you said, playing with nephews, or for me, obviously one of your nieces is my daughter. So, like, if blood sugars are a little bit higher, it's hey, who wants to go play? Who wants to go run around the whole ship for 2 hours? Like, I gotta bring this high blood sugar down. Or, I'll go to my daughter, hey, you want to share a bite of ice cream with daddy if I'm low? And she'll feed me a little bite. So I love that. Of course, being aware is part of the plan. You got to know what's going on with the blood sugars, but not letting it stop you. Rather, it just kind of, you got to be able to pivot, right? When things aren't going according to plan.
Yeah.
Did it ever get in the way of anything?
I'm trying to think. I mean, I guess I don't view it as like in the way. I just view it as like it's just what you have to do. Like if you're high or low, it's like I have to pivot, like you said, and adjust and move forward. Yeah, I'm not remembering any like instance where I like, oh, I couldn't do this thing I wanted to do really, or it totally changed my plans. Sometimes it's an adjustment, like a readjustment, but it's not like I have to totally like, oh, I can't, get off the boat because I'm having this issue, or I can't go to dinner, or try this activity. Yeah, I think that helps me also to like not get as like angry or like frustrated with diabetes, to be like, okay, like this is part of my life and I have to address and readjust, but like I don't have to let it like completely like ruin my plans. Doing the best you can with what you have.
Fantastic pearl of wisdom for everyone to take. And I think that's amazing. And that's just life. I feel like everyone's got their thing that they deal with, but it's your ability and willingness to adapt to life, whether you have to deal with that thing or not. And for some people it's a disease, for other people it's a handicap or family issues or finances, whatever it is. Being able to adapt, I feel like, is what gives us that quality of life back, that freedom of choice. So yeah, I love it. Did you have any other takeaways that you feel like would be helpful for somebody else who might be about to travel, or maybe just wants to have more flexibility in their life with diabetes, or like a mindset thought that you want to add in?
Um, I don't know if I have anything really new. I think a lot of what we talked about, it's like it's possible to do things with diabetes, and it just depends on the person, like what your plan looks like and what you're comfortable with. And a lot of times it's starting small. Like if you're not, not feeling comfortable traveling, start the small trip, take a friend or family member with you. Like you don't have to go solo. Like I did do a solo trip. That was the Spain and Portugal one. But like some people aren't comfortable with that, and that's okay. Like we're all different, and sometimes it's baby steps, sometimes it's pushing ourselves, but at the end of the day, it's up to you, what you choose to do with your life. And you want a life full of joy and the experiences you want to do, but it doesn't have to be like someone else's life either.
Love that. Any embarrassing stories you want to share with me? I'm kidding. Don't do it.
What's about you?
About me, I'll talk all day, right? How much time do we have? No, I really appreciate you taking time to just kind of have this conversation. I know a lot of people hear about my thoughts on diabetes and very analytical and by the numbers and do the math, but I really wanted to share this because I know that you and I had pretty similar time and range and overall control during this trip. You weren't, I'm living my best life and completely ignoring diabetes. Like, you actually maintained good numbers, right? And that's the big key, the big takeaway is that there's more than one way to do this thing with diabetes. And really, we're looking at what am I willing to put in for work and what's the outcome I'm aiming for. And you made it clear that you're able to still live your life and manage diabetes. And I think it's a beautiful thing, especially when we both get to have the background that we do, the knowledge, but to share that with others and lead by example. So thank you for leading by example and for being an awesome diet buddy. Love having you here.
Couldn't do without you.
Yeah. And I know that a lot of people asked about this episode, requested it. I checked back and there was like twice as many as I had sent you. So a lot of people wanted to hear from you. So if this is something that you as the viewer would like us to do more of, or even just a second one, I don't know how many interviews Karlyn's going to give us, but let us know what topic would be helpful to cover if we ever did a second interview. Drop that in the comments so we can know what kind of stuff would be helpful for you guys. and let us know if you enjoyed it. So, Karlyn, thank you so much for spending time with me on Zoom. We'll have to meet up in person at some point again soon. But the cruise was a blast. I love that I get to talk to somebody else who gets it. And to me, it's a huge pro. I hate that you have to have diabetes, but I'm grateful that it's brought us closer together. It's a blessing.
It is a blessing to not have to be alone in something you go through, and yeah, like you said, to have someone close to you who understands. I think it's I can't imagine, not having each other, going through diabetes and life and everything that happens with it. So grateful for you too.
Yeah. Our other sisters are never going to get it. So forget that. No, they're awesome too. All right, just in case they watch this. All right. Well, thank you for hanging out. Everybody else, thanks for watching. We got some videos somewhere on the screen for you that you can go check out next. And be sure to leave that comment if you'd like to see more material, more resources like this. We'll catch you guys in the next video. And keep up the fight.